The smell of death and decay is unmistakable on the humid, salty breeze, and it's coming from the sea, just visible in the distance. That scent seems like a bad sign, but the sound of waves crashing on the shore draws you closer, stumbling over rocks covered in a damp patchwork of vegetation. These plants are small and spongy, just a few centimeters tall at most. They're bryophytes, ancient liverworts and mosses. Flowers, roots, and seeds haven't made their appearance here or anywhere else on the planet yet. And these simple plants blanketing the ground are the only living things you see on land. As you get closer and closer to the ocean, though, you start to notice the washed up fragments of sea creatures piling up at the rack line, where the high tides strand marine debris on the sand. Fragments of exoskeleton litter the beach, the broken bodies of crustaceans and other ancient arthropods. Sea scorpions are rare here, but they number among the dead. To your modern eyes, they look like a nightmarish hybrid of a horseshoe crab, a lobster, and a scorpion. Trilobites haven't been spared either, though you can only see a few of their segmented, oval-shaped bodies, partially covered by sand and bits of algae. The lifeless corpses of eel-like conodonts and tentacled cephalopods, early relatives of today's octopuses and squids, rot in the afternoon heat, feasted upon only by microbes. And piling up in numbers beyond count are the empty shells of brachiopods and bivalves, bleached white from the sun, clicking against each other as they're knocked together by the waves. They're all victims of an event that you've arrived in the aftermath of, here at the very end of the Ordovician period, around 444 million years ago. The planet has never experienced anything like this before. It's the first of the so-called Big Five mass extinctions in the history of life. And while there wasn't much living on land yet that could feel the extinction's effects, marine ecosystems have collapsed and more than 80% of species in the oceans have died out. You're surrounded by their remains right now, washed ashore onto a landscape that doesn't yet have any scavengers to pick through the debris. It's quiet, without the cries of gulls or other seabirds fighting over the scraps. But as you wade into the water and paddle a little way out, you can see that the marine realm isn't a total post-apocalyptic wasteland. You spot a colorful tube-shaped sponge anchored to the seabed, seemingly alive and healthy. And then another sponge, this one a different shape and color, but just as healthy looking. And another and another. As your eyes adjust to the water, you realize there are thousands of them, stretching as far as you can see. Amidst the devastation, sponges have taken over and built a kind of paradise that covers much of the seafloor here in the late Ordovician. In our time, this will be a bamboo forest in South China. Somehow, while species all over the Tree of Life are dying, these sponges have managed to survive the challenges of the first ever mass extinction and thrive. But can you figure out how to do the same? Hello, and welcome to Eons Surviving Deep Time, a podcast that gives you a human's eye view of what trying to survive in the past might have looked like. I'm Callie Moore, one of the hosts of PBS Eons, a YouTube channel about the history of life on Earth. And I'm here with Blake DiPastino, one of my co-hosts, to figure out if we would have been dead or thriving if we were dropped into the late Ordovician period. Hello, Blake.
How's it going?
Good. Are you ready for a hypothetical time travel?
I always am, yes.
Awesome. So, since we're in the Ordovician, what's one thing that you know about the period?
My first thought was the End-Ordovician
Right.
and like the first mass extinction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of Ordovician as like the period that taught Earth to cope with death.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
To like handle grief. And I love that for us.
Right.
I also think sponges galore, sponges galore. And I had to Google, did land even exist? I couldn't remember if there was dry land.
Yeah, definitely dry land.
And like, because I'm thinking already about me, whether I can survive there. And do I have to dog paddle the whole time? Or is there a place where I can like go on land and take a breather and then go out and catch more sea scorpions or whatever?
Right.
But those are like the three main things I think of.
Yeah, for sure. Most of the period, the oceans and life was just doing its thing. So not only did we have the Great Ordovician Biodiversification Event, but atmospheric CO2 levels were really high. So sea surface temps were around 40 degrees Celsius. So that's like 104 degrees Fahrenheit. So
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Okay.
it was really hot. But yeah, you hit on the big five, the first of the big five. We think that this extinction event was pretty mysterious. We're not 100% sure what was going on. And it lasted a few million years, maybe like 2 to 5 million years. So it was a big one. All right. We have broken down our first priorities and concerns for time travel. And your options here, I would like you to pick your top priority, your number one here, and that's where we're going to start. So we've got food and water, we've got animal hazards, we've got environmental geological hazards, and then we're going to talk about what's up with all the sponges. But out of those, what's your top priority for the late Ordovician?
So the extinction event is over at this point, right? Like, am I personally out of the woods that don't exist yet?
Kind of. We're
Okay.
we're kind of in the aftermath of it, so it's still a little tedious. There's a lot of dead stuff, in other words.
Yeah. Okay. My concern then would be food and water, because a bunch of my food has just died.
Yes.
And like you and the setup, the cold open, you described all of these decomposing animals, marine creatures on the beach, and I'm like, that's what I got to work with, right?
Right.
Or I can go out there and like punch a sea scorpion or whatever. We can get to that later.
Well, we do have sea scorpions, so there were occasional surviving sea scorpions. So there were that. You've got some nautiloids, so
Yeah.
some nautiloids, yep, and graptolites. But graptolites are like these little tiny filter-feeding planktonic colonial animals that live in these little interconnected cubbies of some structure. We actually don't know what their structure is made out of.
Interesting.
But they look like little saw blades. So I don't know if they're worth it, but we definitely have sea scorpions and nautiloids. But would you want to eat either of those?
Nautiloids. Sure. I'm sure the inside is tasty, right? You just have to get in there.
Yeah.
Just like a giant pointy escargot.
Right.
I guess are they all pointy? I don't know. Some of them aren't.
Some of them are coiled.
Sea scorpions, it's a lot of work to get the meat out of those claws, but the claws are big and the belly. My other question was about like fresh water. So if I can swim my way onto land, my understanding, I think these things change a lot over time as more research is done, but my understanding is that the End-Ordovician happened largely because of cooling. And so sea levels dropped, but also I think, wasn't there like an influx of fresh water?
Yeah. So
like erosion depositional events.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
so will I have water to drink, or am I just stuck with seawater?
I think you are going to have water to drink. You're probably in luck there. So a lot of scientists think that at the very end of the Ordovician was marked by the melting of glaciers. And so we would have had quite a bit of fresh water coming off of those. That was during one pulse, though. So fresh water is probably not going to be an issue, but definitely foods. So sea scorpions, I mean, people eat horseshoe crabs now. There's not like a whole lot of meat on them, but people do
they
eat
really?
them. Yeah. But it's really the eggs. People like the eggs.
Oh, that's interesting.
So
that's a good idea.
If we happen to be dropped in during sea scorpion reproduction time and you could get a hold of a female and take her eggs, that might be pretty tasty. Nautiloids, you're right. You just scoop them out.
Yeah.
But that comes with
nice garlic and butter, and
that comes with a good question. Like, are you going to eat them raw? Like,
yeah,
yeah.
Like you could,
because like
I guess I have to, right?
Well, I mean, so
because there's no wood to make fire.
There's no wood, but there is mosses. So maybe you could like smoke your food. You could have smoked nautiloid.
Yeah. Smoked nautiloid, I suppose.
Dry out some bryophytes and something. You wouldn't want to eat the bryophytes, though, today.
I was wondering that, too.
Yeah, you might get high off of them, but mosses, it's real iffy. It's not recommended that you eat mosses. So putting any plant vegetation into like a nice little End-Ordovician salad might not be wise, but drying them out and smoking your food, maybe, if you can get a fire lit. Maybe. maybe we could do that.
What would happen if I ate moss?
It could kill you.
Huh? Really? Like it's poisonous?
Some of them are very poisonous. Yes.
Wow.
And it's really hard to know which ones are going to hurt you and which ones aren't going to hurt you. Like today in the modern world, I think there's only like 4 or 5 species that are like on the, okay, if you have to eat moss or die, you could eat these mosses, but you shouldn't do it any other time. So like it'd be one of those ones, you'd take a little nibble and wait a few hours and see.
Yep.
See if you get any symptoms and then maybe eat a little bit more. But we haven't talked about any fishies. So there were the ostracoderms, so the jawless armored fish. So you'd have to get in all that armor to get to them. But maybe?
And what would I use as bait to catch one?
Well, it looks like ostracoderms were kind of restricted to shallow water environments. And we actually have these really cool trace fossils of like their bellies, like a whole bunch of them, like a little belly print, a little belly print. And so we think that they shoaled together in shallow water. So you might be able to just like wade up to your waist and just pluck one out of the ocean.
Oh, dope.
Mr. Miyagi style.
And then just punch it.
Yeah. Getting into it might be a problem, but there are rocks, and I'm sure there's meat on the inside of all of that. So
yeah, there got to be.
Yeah,
I'd need a rock to crack open the armor.
Yeah, and then maybe cut it into real tiny. We'll cut it with our super flat rock into some nice sashimi. And
they laid eggs too, probably.
Yeah. Yep. So
there's caviar again.
Yep, we got some caviar.
Interesting.
So there are some things.
I'm hazy about fish. Like, how did the End-Ordovician affect fish life? Were there other, like, did bony fishes exist yet?
No, not yet.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, we don't get really jawed fish until the Silurian, the next period.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I think the End-Ordovician event was pretty rough on the jawless fish, the ostracoderms. It was pretty rough on them, but they didn't go totally extinct yet. I think they're taken out by the End-Devonian extinction event with the placoderms, the jawed armored fish. They all get knocked out completely at the End-Ordovician. But right now, it's just the jawless armored ones.
And bonus that they're jawless because they're less bitey.
Yes.
That way.
Yes, indeed.
I can just pick it up. Boom. I want what's in you.
Yep.
Crack it open.
Yeah. Now, we do have a lot of sponges, as you heard.
Yes.
There's a ton of sponges, but like, are you going to eat a sponge? So, I don't want to eat a sponge. Yeah. You're not supposed to eat sponges because they're pretty toxic and you're not going to get a lot out of them. I mean, they're made of spicules. And collagen.
Yeah. Okay, collagen. That's what I was going to ask. Which is a protein.
Yeah, true. Your hair would look nice and your skin.
my hair and nails would be on point.
Yeah. Is what you're worried about when you're dealing with a extinction event. Hair and nails.
But is that what the structure is?
Yeah. Like, I mean, sponges confuse me. That they're alive, that they're animals. It's pretty crazy. But what's great about these sponge communities is anything that's alive is living in the sponge community. So whether or not we were actually eating the sponges, which we shouldn't do, at least there would be resources within the sponge forest. So you could become a hunter of the sponge forests. Which totally sounds like a D&D game name.
Yeah, or like a straight to Amazon movie that I would probably be in.
Mm-hmm. Hunter of the sponge forests. Yes, exactly.
Like dollar store Aquaman, basically. But what do you mean when you say that everything that is alive lives in the sponge forest? So you mean we're talking like the sea scorpions and the ostracoderms and...
Yeah. So the
why are they there?
The sponges kind of made a palatable environment. So when everything got wiped out, the sponges were like, what ifs? and they held down the fort, if you will. And so if you were alive, it would be kind of like a coral reef, but only a sponge reef. And so
Oh, okay.
coral reefs are just full of life because you have a nice hierarchy. You have not a hierarchy. You have a nice food web. So you got little stuff, medium-sized stuff, big stuff. And they need places to hide and live and eat not themselves, but also eat things.
Yeah.
And so having this little sponge forest would be kind of like a refugia for anything that's alive still. They just gather together where there's food for them, and then other things gather there to eat the smaller things, et cetera, et cetera.
Like we might be here because of the sponges, right? Because they took over. So by this time, the episode will have posted the YouTube episode about Sponge World.
Spoilers. No, I'm kidding.
I think.
Yeah, Sponge World.
And they helped, like you were saying, they helped create these sort of mini ecosystems, habitats, and like stabilize the environment because they were like static and they were filter feeders. So they would feed off of the detritus, the remains of like dead organisms, and also the runoff from land.
Yep.
And sediment or deposition events. They would just feed off of those. And so like they kind of, held down the fort for Earth.
Right. They did.
Until we got our act together.
Exactly.
Until we, grieved, parted ways with our loss. And then, so we might be here because the sponges were in charge for a while.
Ooh, go sponges.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got food. We've got sea scorpions. We got nautiloids. We got jawless armored fish, the ostracoderms. We've got plants not to eat, but maybe to cook with, is to smoke our foods if we can get a fire lit. We've got water. So that's looking pretty good. We've got a place to hunt. We've got this little sponge forest to go to. So let's now change gears and think about the animal hazards that we might have had to deal with during the Ordovician event.
Okay.
So luckily, since we're being dropped into a mass extinction event, the animals are going to be pretty few and far between because everything's dead.
Yeah.
But there are still
like
things.
I'm unarmored. I'm more chewy than crunchy.
Yes.
So vulnerable.
Yes. Exactly. And there were some
I do have a jaw.
pretty big sea scorpions out there.
So how big are we talking? I was wondering about that too.
So how tall are you?
5'11".
5'11". All right. As tall as you, sea scorpion. So
wow.
Yeah, they were about 1.7 meters long, which is roughly about 6 feet long. There was Pentacopterus was one of them. And they were predatory. So they had little graspy hands that would grasp their prey and then pass it to their mouths. So they could get you. And then there was this other species that was like 2.5 feet long. So there was smaller ones, and then there were some bigger ones. But that one, we've actually found coprolites from that smaller one, and they had they had trilobite fragments, and they had other sea scorpion fragments.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so they were cannibals. Yeah, which is what? That's kind of creepy.
Yeah, like tough times, whatever it takes.
Tough times, exactly. So these things were at least tough enough that they could crack exoskeletons of other arthropods.
And trilobites made it through also. I remember being relieved to hear that because they're adorable.
Yes.
And I probably wouldn't eat them just because they're cute. I just like them.
Too cute to eat them. Well, some of the largest trilobites of all time also lived in the Ordovician. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. There was a genus Isotellus, and Isotellus has some of the biggest, actually, the biggest Isotellus rex. Yes,
that's awesome.
I know.
What a dope name.
What a dope name. It doesn't have the same I-Rex instead of T-Rex. It doesn't.
I-Rex?
I-Rex. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. But it was 28 inches long. So nearly 71 centimeters.
Wow.
That's huge.
Okay.
And
That's big.
there's this really nice graphic online. If you look up Isotellus rex, our largest trilobites, you're going to see this graphic, and it's got several large species of them, including Isotellus rex. But they use an umbrella, just a normal size umbrella, and that's like how big this trilobite was. It's like the
Really?
length of an umbrella.
Oh my gosh. Huh.
So,
I mean, that would be good eating. That would feed my whole family.
right. If you could get one, you could eat it for sure.
And they weren't like super pinchy or defensive, right? So
we don't know.
unlike sea scorpions.
We don't know much about them because we haven't found any of their mouth parts yet. But
interesting.
Like we're still bigger than them, so I doubt that they would try to take us on. Like Isotellus rex would be like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to eat that thing." But the sea scorpions, though, they might be trying.
Are they my biggest concern? You think?
I would.
The sea scorpions.
Well, there's one more. There's one more, and that's the giant cephalopods. So like Chimeroceras and Indoceras. Some of them approached 20 feet long.
Oh, wow.
So that's like 6 meters long. Yeah. Like real big. Real big. But it looks like we might not have to worry about like the really, really big ones. It seemed like once they got to that ginormous size, they lived far out in deeper water. But
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, but they're young. Yeah, they're the juvenile ones, the babies, stayed much closer to shore where it was safe. So like we could probably get maybe nibbled on by one that was like 10 feet long.
Wow.
It's still really big. Oh my gosh. That's a really big animal. But I guess if you could get one though, your calamari would be off the chain. It would be tasty, maybe. But again, that's if you could get one.
Put up a fight.
It would probably put up a fight, yeah. Especially a 20-foot long one. I don't even think I would want to tussle with that. Even try. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go like so basically what I'm saying is if you get into deep water, you're gonna have to be careful.
Okay. Good to know.
And if you're even walking in the shallows, watch your toes. Watch your toes. We don't want to get nibbled on. But otherwise, the vertebrates, I mean, they ain't scary at all. They don't have any jaws.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
And there's nothing.
Okay, I'm feeling pretty good about this.
Yeah. And the predators are so big that I feel like you'd see them coming. So
now, is there like they're filter feeding and plankton, but were there protists like were there kelp forests or did that kind of thing? Because you mentioned, I was surprised how warm sea surface temperatures were. That's really warm.
Yes.
And so, like, was there a lot of plant or protist life?
So kelp, no, but kelp-like plants, like macroalgae, yes.
Okay.
So, not exactly seaweed. I guess we could try eating it or using it as bait, maybe.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah, either like using it as bait, maybe making a nice salad. But also, I wouldn't want to eat too much of it because that probably is the bottom of the food chain there, and plankton.
Right. Yeah, so you're getting it's like the catfish of the micro world.
So how hot is it on land? If sea surface temperatures, you said it was 40 degrees Celsius?
So 104-ish degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah.
That's like hot tub.
That's hot tub. Yeah. So I feel like we've got the animal hazards covered real nicely. There are some big arthropods. There's some big cephalopods we got to watch out for, but at least on land we'd be okay. But your question about how hot was it on land is very nice to jump into the next issue, which would be environmental and geological hazards at the End-Ordovician event, right?
Terribly hot, I imagine, but there's only non-vascular plants, right, on land.
Yeah, just those bryophytes.
So there are no vertebrates or anything. Okay.
Nope.
But very hot.
Very hot.
I don't have to worry about clothes, which is a plus. You know? I don't have to worry about like giant insects in a carboniferous or whatever. You know, I don't need to get big fly swatter.
Nope.
That's a relief. I'm a desert person. I'm a warm weather person, so I think I would be quite it sounds like a minimalist weekend in Palm Springs for me. You know?
Yeah.
Just like I don't have to worry about clothes. The whole world is like what would you say, 120 or so? It's like Palm Springs in July.
Yeah, it would probably be pretty warm. Pretty warm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm trying to put it in terms that I can understand.
Right. No, that's great.
Yeah.
Palm Springs in the middle of summer. It's gonna be hot. It's gonna be hot.
But safe to say, clothing optional.
No, clothing is. We're together in this. You gotta have some clothes.
Oh. I thought it was just me. Okay.
I am the ferryman through the Ordovician for you.
That's my B. Okay.
No, that's fine. But I mean, more power to you, though. If you were alone, heck yeah, have fun with it. Have fun with it. So I think you touched on this a little bit earlier about the causes of the mass extinction event, and it was kind of a dual problem here for the End-Ordovician, because we don't really know what happened, and there's a lot of hypotheses out there.
I was reading about it before this, and it seems like it keeps going back. Like first it was heat and volcanism, and then it was cooling and runoff and like deposition events. And so I need to get my story straight about like what do I have to prepare for? How do I pack?
Yeah, no, you're I mean, you're in the same boat as the scientists are. So I think a lot of scientists argue that like the key drivers to this mass extinction was global volcanic activity. Just like a lot of mass extinctions. We're messing with the CO2 levels in the atmosphere.
That could go either way, though, right? Because you're right. It releases a bunch of greenhouse gases, which would cause more warming. But then also, if there's ash in the environment, it's going to cause cooling. Because I think we've talked about volcanism causing both things, right?
Yes. And that's kind of the leading idea at the moment. We had this sudden cooling and then an abrupt switch to a greenhouse to icehouse conditions. And that triggered extensive glaciations and a drop in sea level. So all these animals that are living in a hot tub just had a cold shower, basically. And then it was followed by another rapid jump back up to warmer conditions. And so if you were an animal that could survive that cold period, you're like, oh, okay, that's good. Whew, all right, I'm good. And then all of a sudden, the temperature goes way back up and you are now too hot. And so,
what you're describing is Montana in the spring.
Right. You have no idea what it's going to happen. What is going to be tomorrow? Is it going to be 70 or is it going to be negative 20?
Right.
Yep. That's a good way to think about it. So like these sudden oscillations was just like too much for most of life. And
interesting.
It killed off more than 80% of species over the full course of this oscillation or whatever, that's a lot.
So what of all those things, what would be threats to us?
Right. Good.
Geologically or environmentally. Like volcanism doesn't sound very comfy.
No. I think we were there like in the direct aftermath, so maybe not having to worry about like the worst of those eruptions, but you might keep your eye out for any residual rumblings or any little hot spots. Like make sure you I guess there's no sticks yet.
Yeah.
So you throw some rocks and make sure that the ground is totally cooled. So you're not going to just step into like not cooled lava.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
That's a lot to think about.
Yeah. So we're going to have to make sure we have rocks.
What do we know about land masses and like what the climate would be based on the size and the shape of the landmass? Like where were the supercontinents back then? You know, that would be interesting to find out because we've talked about supercontinents that are so big that like the whole interior is just desert because no moisture could ever get to it.
Pangea. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think in the Ordovician, you had one kind of major landmass and you had a bunch of like little islands kind of surrounding it. And so
that sounds nice.
The sea level rising and lowering, though, if you're around small islands, when it's high, it's great. You got a bunch of shallow marine ecosystems and things love shallow marine ecosystems. And then it drops. And so all those ecosystems are high and dry. And then you have a sea level raise back up and it drowns everything. So it
Right.
it was a really
Huh.
tough time. But I think there was like I don't know if I would go so far as to call it a supercontinent, but there was like one bigger continent and then like a fringe of smaller
Okay.
islands around that. But
So if we're on some of the smaller islands, there would be weather
there would be weather.
as opposed to like being all desert all the time.
Yeah, there would be weather.
So that's another thing to worry about.
Yep, some climate issues. And also like with these glaciations and deglaciations, we're going to have to worry about like flash flooding events from glacial melt. Like all of a sudden the glaciers
Oh,
can surge sometimes and move and melt incredibly rapidly. And that would release a ton of fresh water and flash flooding events. So we have to be careful if we were in valleys or coulees and things like that.
right.
Yeah.
Because we need to be close to fresh water,
Mhm.
but not a whole bunch all at once.
Right, right.
Interesting.
And even like we kind of think that there were these flash floods because like the sponges, the fossils that we find today of these sponges seem to have been suddenly buried in flows of sediment that came off the land into the ocean
Yes.
by those melting glaciers. So
Mhm.
we know that these flash floods happened. So we would definitely have to be worried about that.
And I have read about those, right? And that's why sometimes it happened and the sponges did really well because it just brought in a bunch of nutrients into the water,
Mhm.
fresh nutrient supply. But then also there could be deposition just on top of a whole colony.
Right, like too much of a good thing.
Huh.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that seems to be the theme here.
Too
Water
much.
everywhere.
Too much hot, too much ice, too much water, too much sediment.
Yeah.
Too much. Yeah, for
If you
sure.
could just turn it down a little bit, that would be great.
Now there
It's
is
very extra as periods go.
oh yeah, for sure. Very extra. I know because you start out the period with a biodiversification event, like boom times, and then you end it with like everything dies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like pick a lane. I
I
know.
know. That's for real though. For
But
real.
that's what life is about. That's really what the show is about. Is like these cycles of explosions and extinctions,
Mhm.
as we call them.
Yeah.
And everything finds its level. Water finds its new level, if you will, after all of these events.
So there is one more thing that
Okay.
we might have to watch out for.
Okay. Lay it on me.
Space dangers.
Oh, that's right.
Mhm.
Was it gamma rays?
Yes, gamma rays. And I actually had to look up gamma rays because my space knowledge is there, but it's not robust.
All I know is the Hulk. Bruce Banner plus gamma rays equals the Hulk.
And
That's all I know about
gamma
that
rays
form of radiation.
in the real world are produced by the hottest and most energetic objects in the universe, such as neutron stars and pulsars and supernova explosions and black holes. But you got to be directly in line with the gamma ray for it to do anything to you. And this is kind of a fringe idea, but there are people that think that maybe we got hit with a gamma ray.
So what would the evidence for that be? How would you even be able to detect that, to prove or disprove that, you know? I don't have any idea.
Paper here.
Yeah, like where did the idea come from? Someone's like, oh, that seems like the logical solution for all this evidence.
Of course.
You know?
Let's see.
Like, did animals suddenly become Hulkified? Would I become Hulkified if I were there and a gamma ray burst happened? Because I'm thinking about packing. Do I need like larger clothes?
Right. It seems, at least in this abstract of the paper, it seems like the hypotheses of what would happen to a habitable planet if it were hit with a gamma ray is the idea behind it. Not that we have evidence for it, but
I
the
see.
hypothetical happenings of getting hit by one. So it would like knock out our ozone layer. There would be intense solar ultraviolet radiation. It would be a rough time to try to live through one of these. You could get intense and rapid cooling and glaciation because of these. So it's more of like, what would a gamma ray burst do? And it seems like what it would do is what happened during the extinction event.
I see.
Yeah.
So we would be toast, basically.
It would be a rough time. At least our genetics would be toast. We might live through it, but
interesting.
But it would mess with your DNA though. because that's like the problem with being out in ultraviolet light is it hurts your DNA.
And safe to say there's no SPF high enough
Probably not. I
to even.
don't think there's gamma ray burst SPF.
Yeah. I don't recall seeing that at CVS.
Nope, I don't think.
And there's no trees. There's there's nothing. There's no shelter.
I mean, yes and no.
You
There
know?
were still rocks at the surface, so you might be able to find a cave or an overhang or.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. I mean.
So very hot, possibly very high UV exposure, but also very cold and with flooding.
Yeah, with flooding. Yeah, so there are quite a few environmental and geological hazards out there for sure, being dropped at the end of an extinction event for sure.
Okay. There's a bunch of dead stuff on the beach to scavenge.
Oh yeah. Yeah, if you're brave enough to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that like you can't leave shellfish out for very long or you get sick.
Indeed.
So don't eat any of the dead ones, the bivalves and brachiopods maybe. Don't eat any of those.
Oh yeah, bivalves.
But undoubtedly, none of these environmental and geological hazards had much of an effect on all of those sponges because we still have a lot of sponges, right?
Like they were in charge.
Yeah, they dominated.
Someone left them in charge and they're just like, that's cute that you think it's going to offend us.
Just filter feeding.
That doesn't affect us at all.
Filter feeding.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just doing their thing.
Yeah. And these were reported first in 2015, and it's now thought of this like hyper diverse mega community, hyper diverse mega community, like, wow, that's a lot of adjectives in there. But they thrived, and these fossil beds are at least 2,000 kilometers.
Whoa, I had no idea they're that big.
So like legitimate forest of sponges.
Wow.
Yeah. What's now South China is just covered with these sponge beds from the late Ordovician.
And when you say diverse, you mean like a combination of, again, like it creates its own kind of ecosystem or habitat. So it's diverse in terms of like there's a lot of life, but was there diversity like within the speciation of the sponges?
Yes, that's really what we're talking about here. Is like there were some other things, non-sponge other things, but like sponges were super diverse. Like a whole bunch of different types of sponges, not just like one type of sponge that covered the seafloor. There was like a whole bunch of different types of sponges covering the seafloor. And then a few straggling survivors thrown into the mix.
And so they are filter feeders, so they eat plankton and maybe algae.
Mm-hmm. Basically anything small enough to filter through.
It sounds like they survived partly because the stuff that killed everything else was beneficial when it came to the amounts of plankton and algae. Or at least plankton and algae weren't affected by those same things, like sea temperature and influxes of fresh water and what have you.
Yeah.
Deposition events.
Exactly. So they could tolerate the changes better than anything else, it seems like. They filter fed, which would have been super easy to do because everything else is dying and decomposing around you. So you got a lot of organic materials floating in the water now.
Which is like big business for them, right?
Super big business. And then all of a sudden you have a complete lack of competition for resources because everything else is dead.
Right.
So it's like they kind of just was at the best place at the wrong time or the something like that. They would just seem to avoid declining at all and ended up taking over.
So the base of the food web was intact, if not even growing, like plankton and algae. And there's very little competition. So it's like a never-ending soup and salad bar for them.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
2,000 kilometers. That's astonishing to me.
Right. I was shocked to also read that number. I was like, dang.
And there aren't like animals that predate, like there aren't no predators on sponges, right? Because what would you do with them?
There are things that eat sponges today.
Oh, interesting.
There's a couple of things that eat sponges. Let me get back to that.
Huh. I wonder if they were around then.
Are they edible? So things that eat sponges, Like, there's a word for it, and it's spongivorous.
Spongivorous.
Yeah. Which is like my new favorite eating word,
Yes,
spongivorous.
I can't wait to play Scrabble again. That's more than 7 letters, though, and it's too big for Wordle also, but that's a great word.
That's a great
I'm
one.
going to try to work that into next time I'm at a cocktail party. I'm going to work that into a conversation.
Did you know
somehow.
that the
Did you
hawksbill
know
turtle
that hawksbill turtle?
spongivorous? I love it. Love it.
Yeah.
But beyond eating sponges, so, I mean, it's going to be a little hot. The water's going to be a little hot. We got to watch out for big arthropods and cephalopods all over the place. But there's...
Yeah, the cephalopods that totally took me by surprise. I wasn't thinking about those.
That's really big. But we do have food. Whether or not we'd be able to cook it is questionable. We've got things to watch out for. But again, we have things to eat. On land-wise, we don't have really much to worry about except for gamma ray bursts and old volcanic activity and flash floods, probably.
And the heat.
And the heat, yes.
Dehydration, but again, if there's
we got water.
Flooding, fresh water.
We got plenty of fresh water. So, how you feeling about this?
I'm like cautiously optimistic about making it through this time travel trip.
Yeah.
There are a lot of resources, and they're like what there seems to be that would be accessible to us would be pretty big and pretty dumb and pretty slow.
Mm-hmm.
And it just is a matter of getting through the shells. We need to pack in like one of those crab things, like a nutcracker.
Yeah, like the crab claw cracker thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
next time I'm Red Lobster, I'll just sort of take one with me. But again, food, water. The thing I was most concerned about was like, do we live in the water? Or do we live on the land? Because the water seems more hospitable than the land, but then you get pruny after a while.
Yeah, you get pruny. And then also there are some things that could be nibbling on you. So I would definitely take my chances on land, find a nice little sea cave or something, get out of the heat into the shade for a little bit, for sure. But if you could take one item with you to make your survival more likely, what item would you take back to the late Ordovician?
How would you, cooking food seems important to me. Maybe that's a luxury. No, I think I would need a weapon of some kind, right? Like, instead of just like punching a sea scorpion, if I had a club, cudgel, I don't know.
A club?
Or a Swiss Army knife. It was like part hammer, part spoon for scooping out the goo. And like a magnifying glass in there so I could use the sun to start a fire, but then there's no fuel for a fire.
Well, again, we might be able to light some dried moss or something.
Yeah. And may at least smoke the smoked oysters.
Yeah.
Smoked bivalves.
A Swiss Army knife, that's a good one.
And other predators are in the water, so we could escape on land. We could go to land when it gets too pinchy and bitey in there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
How are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling also cautiously optimistic. I think it would definitely be an easier time than the Cambrian, but it's not going to be a walk in the park.
Yeah.
We've got more food choices, but land is still awkward. But we don't have to worry about anything hurting us on land other than like ourselves and stubbing toes and stuff like that. But but yeah.
Okay, I have another question for you.
Yeah.
So this was like we are teleporting back to Sponge World, right? And their sponges are still around, but they're not in charge anymore the way they were. So what happened?
Life recovered. Life recovered. They did such a good job at making little hospitable refugias is that everything that survived could come back. And then they were competition. All of the things
more competition, more predators.
Exactly. All the things that actually let them become Sponge World because they disappeared or died or whatever came back and put them in check,
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So they did too good a job. It was their own doing.
It was their own doing.
Huh. That's quite an arc. It's quite a story.
All right. Well, thanks for traveling with me today, Blake.
It was fun. Let's do this again.
For sure. Another time period.
Yeah. Hopefully, gosh, I mean, that was not very scary, But I feel like we have enough resources to get by.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
All we need is like, if they had like In-N-Out Burger or something just as like a fallback.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Well,
Like
luckily,
Montana could use an In-N-Out Burger.
we can just pop back to our own time and be done with it. So my last question for you today, Blake, is what if you could take a non-living thing back to the present?
Oh.
Non-living.
Okay.
What would you bring back to the present from the late Ordovician?
A non-living thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you know that I have a beef with like coconut crabs.
Yes.
And I don't know what it is, but like I've never met one, but just like seen footage of them, and they probably ate Amelia Earhart, but I managed to get past that because I actually am kind of obsessed with sea scorpions, and I think that they're just super dope. And I was hoping that there would be a part of this episode where like I could put a rein on one and like ride it sort of like Aquaman through the ocean.
Yeah.
As it's flapping around. I don't know if it would let me do that. But could I take like part of a sea scorpion body, like a dead one, and bring it home just to have stuffed and put over my fireplace?
For sure. I think as long as it's dead.
I think they're super cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as long as it's dead. Totally. So you bring back a sea scorpion. And
that's one of those things that like we mentioned and people were like, are those real? Did that really exist? And I just want to bring back proof that they existed. I'm like, yeah, it's right there, bro. I killed that myself.
Look at it. Look at it. Look at it. Killed that way back 444 million years ago.
I know. Gather around, children, and I'll tell you a tale. It begins 500 million years ago almost.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's a good one. I'd probably take back a trilobite eye from like one of the big isotelists, like...
Yeah.
Look at this. It's like my whole hand over your eyeball.
Oh, yeah. See, that'd be nice to have on your coffee table there. It's like a little conversation piece.
Just check it out. That's a trilobite eyeballs because they're compound eyes. So there's more than one in the eyeball, like an insect.
Otherwise, like what else would you bring back? Just moss, bryophytes,
I guess you could try to bring back one of those giant Chimeraceras shells, 20 foot long.
Yeah, that's true.
Turn it into your bed, sleep inside of it.
They put a futon in there,
yeah. Check this out. This is my bed. In a giant.
I sleep in this. Yeah, I sleep in an Ordovician kind of giant shrimp. Oh no, it's more like a giant
squid with a shell.
Yeah, with the shell. Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God. That was hilarious. Oh boy. All right. Well, we're going to survive.
Good times.
We're going to take a Swiss Army knife and we're going to take a Eurypterid back to stuff.
Yep. Eurypterids. Exactly. Thank you. I couldn't grasp that name, that word.
Yep. Well, that's a good time. We're going to have a good time.
Okay. So I feel like I'm 1-0 so far for these time traveling survival trips. Woo! Next time we'll see.
It's going to be your toughest one yet, I think.
Yep.
For sure. All right. Well, I'll catch you in the Permian, Blake.
Okay. I'm going to start training.
Well, you're not dead, but you're probably not exactly thriving either. You've got bits of exoskeleton stuck between your teeth from trying to make a meal of sea scorpions and trilobites. You can't shake the smell of smoke from your attempts at making bryophyte bonfires. And you're sick of seeing endless sponges everywhere, mocking you by making survival seem so easy. But you're alive. And as you depart the Ordovician world, you feel a distinct sense of optimism for the future. Because while the aftermath of the first ever mass extinction meant that your visit was a pretty bleak one, the event also gave life on Earth a chance to show just how resilient it is. For many species, the recovery is pretty quick, and that may partially be thanks to the safe haven created by the sponges. By stabilizing the sediment and concentrating organic matter in and around their mega communities, they provide food webs with an opportunity to re-establish themselves. And the Silurian doesn't just see ecosystems recover, it sees them expand and innovate too. Both plants and animals solidify their tentative foothold on land, spreading and diversifying throughout the terrestrial environment. But while they and you were able to make it through the first mass extinction, many more challenges lie ahead for both of you. Thanks for joining us on this journey into deep time. Tune in next episode to trek with us through the coal swamps of the Carboniferous period. In the meantime, you can find us telling more stories from our planet's past over at youtube.com/eons. This episode was written by Farhan Mehta, fact-checked by me, Callie Moore, and hosted by me and Blake DiPastino. It was edited by Chris Ankiko, and our sound design and mix was by Callie Dishman. The show is produced by Sarah Suda, our script editor is Dr. Paige Madison, and our editorial director is Dr. Darcy Shapiro. Our executive producers are Seth Radley and Hank Green. The executive in charge for PBS is Maribel Lopez, and John Campbell is PBS's Assistant Director of Programming. Eons Surviving Deep Time is a production of Complexly for PBS Digital Studios, and we are distributed by PRX. Until next time, you can always visit us over at youtube.com/eons for more stories from Deep Time.